Will this email exchange matter in 5 years? Will anyone remember who was right? Or will what actually matters be that you don't pour gasoline on a fire that would have burned out on its own? Every bit of scorched earth you create now, you're going to have to walk through it later. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Justin, you just don't know my ex. They're impossible. They're unreasonable. I have to fight. Maybe you're right. Maybe your ex is high conflict. Maybe they are making everything harder. But here's the question I want you to sit with. Even if that's true, what strategy gives you the best chance of building the life you actually want? Because sometimes the answer isn't to match their energy. Sometimes the answer is to be so clear about your long-term goals that you refuse to get pulled into battles that don't serve your future. Welcome to the Conscious Divorce Podcast, where we explore divorce not as an ending, but as a transformative opportunity to reclaim your life, reboot your identity, and become the person you are always meant to be. I'm Justin Milrad, certified divorce coach, MBA, financial planner, and founder of Reclaim and Reboot Divorce Coaching, and author of You 2.0, Divorce, A Better Way Forward. Before we dive in, a quick disclaimer. I'm a certified divorce coach, not an attorney, therapist, or financial advisor. Nothing in this podcast constitutes legal, therapeutic, or financial advice. The information shared here is for education and based on research, professional expertise, and my own journey through divorce. Always consult with a licensed professional for advice specific to your situation. Now let's get into today's episode. Picture this moment. You're sitting in a conference room, fluorescent lights, the smell of stale coffee, your attorney on one side, your ex's attorney on the other, and between you, stacks of documents that represent everything you built together, now itemized, divided, and disputed. Your lawyer leans over and whispers, "We can fight this. We can win." And something in you lights up. Finally, a chance to win, to prove you were right, to make them see what they did, to get what you deserve. But here's the question that will define everything that comes next. What does winning actually mean? Because the ones who win in court often lose in life. And the ones who shift their focus from winning the case to winning the future, they're the ones who actually build something worth having. Today, we're going to challenge everything you've been told about divorce. We're talking about research, real stories, and the long-term impact of the choices you're making right now. And we're going to talk about what it actually takes to build a life you're proud of on the other side of this. So grab your coffee, find a quiet space, and let's do this work together. Act 1, the illusion of winning. The story no one tells you. Let me start with this story. A few years ago, I worked with a client. Let's call her Rachel. Rachel came to me 6 months after her divorce was finalized. By every external measure, she had won. She got the house, primary custody, a favorable financial settlement. Her attorney called it a decisive victory. But when Rachel sat across from me in our first session, she said something I'll never forget. I won everything I fought for, so why do I feel like I've lost at everything that mattered? Rachel's kids were struggling in school. Her relationship with them was strained. They'd watched 2 years of high conflict litigation. They'd heard things that kids should never hear. Her ex was bitter, making co-parenting nearly impossible. And Rachel herself, exhausted, depleted. She spent $80,000 in legal fees, 2 years of her life drowning in stress, and somewhere along the way, she'd lost herself. She won the case, but she was losing her life. Now, let me be clear about something right up front. There are times when you absolutely need to fight in court. When there's abuse, addiction, parental alienation, financial malfeasance, yes, you fight. You protect yourself, you protect your kids. But here's what I've observed after years of doing this work. Most divorces don't require total war. Most divorces are between two fundamentally decent people who couldn't make the marriage work. And in those cases, which is most cases, the battle itself becomes the problem. So when I talk about winning the future, I'm talking about something radically different than what our adversarial legal system is designed for. I'm talking about creating a life you'd actually want to live 5 years from now, building financial stability that lasts beyond the settlement, raising children who feel safe, loved, and emotionally healthy, reconstructing your identity and confidence, developing the capacity to trust yourself again, creating an inner peace that doesn't depend on what your ex does or doesn't do. This isn't about being passive. This isn't about rolling over. It's about being strategic with what matters most. Here's the thing most people miss. There are two parallel processes happening in every divorce. There's a legal process, which is necessary, important, and required. And then there's the life process, the one that determines who you become, how your children adapt, and what your next 20, 30, 40 years actually looks like. Most people pour 90% of their energy into the legal proceedings and 10% into the life process. And then they wonder why, when the legal process ends, they feel so lost. Winning the future means inverting that ratio. Why winning the case creates long-term losses. Let's talk about what happens when winning the case becomes your primary goal. And I get it. The pull is powerful. You've been hurt, betrayed, maybe, certainly disappointed, and the legal system offers you something seductive. The possibility of vindication, of being declared right, of making them pay. But here's what the research tells us. A landmark study published in the Journal of Family Psychology followed over 1,000 divorced families for 12 years. The researchers found that the intensity of legal conflict was the single strongest predictor of negative long-term outcomes for adults and for children. Stronger than who initiated the divorce, stronger than financial circumstances, stronger even than pre-existing mental health issues. High conflict divorce was associated with 3 times higher rates of ongoing parental conflict post-divorce, 2 times higher rates of anxiety and depression in 5 to 10 years later, significantly lower life satisfaction for both parents, higher rates of physical health problems, including cardiovascular issues. Think about that. The very thing you think will help you win aggressive litigation, fighting over every detail, is statistically likely to make your life worse, not just during divorce, years afterwards. Dr. Robert Emery, a psychologist at the University of Virginia who studied divorce for 4 decades, summarizes it perfectly. You can win the battle and lose the war. The battle is the divorce. The war is the rest of your life. I see this pattern constantly. Someone sits across from me and says, "My attorney says we can destroy them in court." And I ask a simple question. Okay, but then what? You destroy them in court. They're bitter, broke, and angry. How does that affect your co-parenting? How does that affect your kids, your stress level, your health, your ability to actually move forward? Because in most cases, you don't get to be done with your ex. If you have kids together, you're in each other's lives for decades. Graduations, weddings, grandchildren, medical emergencies, holidays. Every bit of scorched earth you create now, you're going to have to walk through it later. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Justin, you just don't know my ex. They're impossible. They're unreasonable. I have to fight. Maybe you're right. Maybe your ex is high conflict. Maybe they are making everything harder. But here's the question I want you to sit with. Even if that's true, what strategy gives you the best chance of building the life you actually want? Because sometimes the answer isn't to match their energy. Sometimes the answer is to be so clear about your long-term goals that you refuse to get pulled into battles that don't serve your future. The 5-year filter. So how do you make this shift? How do you stop thinking like someone trying to win a case and start thinking like someone to win in life? It starts with a tool I use in my coaching practice called the 5-year filter. Every major decision you face during divorce, I want you to run through this question. Will this decision make my life better or worse 5 years from now? Not 5 days from now, not what feels satisfying in the moment, 5 years. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Your ex wants to keep the antique dining table you inherited together. It feels personal. It feels like they're taking something that matters. Your attorney says you can fight for it. 5-year filter. Will fighting over this table improve your life 5 years from now? Will it matter more than preserving goodwill for co-parenting? More than saving $5,000 in legal fees? Another example. Your ex's attorney sends an aggressive email full of accusations. Everything in you wants to fire back, defend yourself, escalate. 5-year filter. Will this email exchange matter in 5 years? Will anyone remember who was right? Or will what actually matters be that you don't pour gasoline on a fire that would have burned out on its own? One more, you have an opportunity to settle. It's not perfect. You'd get 60% of what you think is fair, not 100%. But settlement means you can end this, move forward, reclaim your energy and your time. 5-year filter. Will that additional 40% be worth another year of stress, $30,000 in legal fees, and the toll on your mental health and your children's well-being? This is something you really need to think through. The people who thrive after divorce are the ones who get ruthlessly clear on what actually matters and then make every decision in service of that vision, not in service of being right, not in service of winning. They ask themselves, what kind of parent do I want to be? What kind of life do I want to build? What does peace actually look like for me? Who do I want to become through this process? And then they align every decision, legal, financial, emotional, with those answers. That's the shift from being reactive to intentional, from being pulled by your ex's choices to being led by your own vision. And that's where transformation begins. Act 2, the architecture of winning the future, the 5 pillars. All right, let's get practical. If winning the future is a goal, what does it actually require? What are you building towards? I break it down into 5 pillars. Think of these as the foundation of your You 2.0 life. 5 domains that, if you get them right, will completely change your trajectory. Pillar 1, emotional and mental health. This is a foundation everything else is built on. If your mental health is deteriorating, nothing else works. Not co-parenting, not career decisions, not relationship, nothing. Divorce is one of the most stressful life events a human being can experience, right up there with the death of a loved one. A study from the University of Arizona found that people going through divorce showed biological markers of chronic stress comparable to those with serious chronic illness. Elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, compromised immune function. But here's a crucial part. These effects are not inevitable. They're the result of how you go through divorce, not the divorce itself. Research published in Clinical Psychology Review found that people who engaged in therapeutic support during divorce returned to baseline mental health within 18 to 24 months. People who didn't, many were still struggling 5 years later. So what does winning look like in the future here? It looks like making therapy or coaching non-negotiable, not optional. Building a support system that includes people who've been through this. Implementing daily practices like meditation, exercise, journaling. Treating your mental health with the same urgency as your legal strategy. And remember this, your children are watching. Your emotional regulation becomes their model for how to handle hard things. That alone makes this pillar worth every ounce of investment. Pillar 2, co-parenting and children's well-being. Here's the hard truth. Your kids don't care who was right. They don't care who initiated the divorce or who was more difficult. What they care about is this. Do I still feel safe? Do both my parents still love me? Is the chaos going to end? A comprehensive meta-analysis from the Journal of Marriage and Family, reviewing over 200 studies, found that children's long-term adjustment after divorce depends almost entirely on 2 factors: the level of ongoing conflict between parents and the quality of the children's relationship with each parent. Everything else, who got the house, how the money was divided, even which parent has primary custody, mattered far less than those 2 things. Children in low-conflict divorce, where parents maintained respectful communication, showed no significant differences in long-term outcomes compared to children from intact families. Let me say that again. No significant differences. But children exposed to high-conflict divorce, ongoing fighting, bad-mouthing, being used as messengers or weapons, showed elevated rates of anxiety, depression, and relationship difficulties that lasted into adulthood. So winning the future here means never using your children as messengers, spies, or therapists. Never bad-mouthing your ex in front of them, even when it's deserved. Creating consistency and stability in your home. Protecting them from adult conflicts and financial stress. Your children didn't choose this. They're counting on at least one parent to be steady, to show them that love doesn't just end because a marriage does. Pillar 3, financial stability. Financial stress is one of the biggest obstacles to rebuilding your life. And most people make critical financial mistakes during divorce, not because they lack intelligence, but because they're making decisions while emotionally flooded. A study from Ohio State University found that people lose, on average, 77% of their net worth during divorce, not because of the division itself, but because of poor decision-making during the process, impulse settlements, fighting over the wrong things, ignoring tax implications, not understanding long-term costs. Winning the future financially means working with a financial advisor who specializes in divorce, understanding the difference between assets that look impressive now and income that eventually sustains you. Not fighting for the house if you can't realistically afford it long term, and thinking about retirement, healthcare, children's education, not just the immediate split. You can win by getting the house, the car, and the retirement account and find yourself broke in 3 years because you didn't account for ongoing costs. Financial stability isn't about the size of the settlement. It's about making choices that set you up for long-term security. Pillar 4, identity reconstruction. One of the most overlooked dimensions of divorce is what it does to your identity. For years, maybe decades, you've been a we. Your identity was intertwined with another person's. You were someone's spouse. And now, who are you? Psychologists call this self-concept disruption. Research published in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin found that divorce causes a significant drop in self-concept clarity. People become less sure of who they are, and that uncertainty correlates with higher anxiety, lower life satisfaction, and difficulty making decisions. But here's where it gets interesting. Post-traumatic growth research shows that these moments of identity disillusion can lead to profound positive change. People often report years later that the crisis forced them to discover parts of themselves they'd buried or never even knew existed. I remember standing in my own apartment after my divorce, alone, realizing I didn't even know what I wanted for dinner. That tiny decision felt enormous because it wasn't really about dinner. It was about this question. Who am I when I get to choose for myself? Winning the future in this domain means doing the identity work, reconnecting with who you were before the marriage and exploring who you want to become, rebuilding confidence through small wins and new challenges, giving yourself permission to evolve. This is where You 2.0 is born. Pillar 5, long-term peace and resilience. The final pillar is peace, not the absence of problems, but the capacity to stay grounded when problems arise. Life doesn't stop being hard after divorce. Your ex might still be difficult. Co-parenting will have challenges. You'll face financial stress, dating, anxiety, and parenting struggles. The question isn't whether you'll face adversity. The question is, who do you become in relationship to it? Resilience research from Dr. Stephen Southwick at Yale and Dr. Martin Seligman at Penn shows that resilience isn't something you either have or don't. It's something you build through having a clear sense of purpose, maintaining strong social connections, practicing self-compassion, developing a growth mindset, and building physical health and stress tolerance. Winning the future means building a life where your peace isn't dependent on external circumstances, where your ex's choices don't determine your emotional state, where you have the internal resources to handle whatever comes. This is a long game. This is what lasts. Act 3, becoming You 2.0. What the research actually promises. Before we go further, I want to dismantle one of the most damaging myths about divorce, that it ruins lives permanently, that you're doomed to be unhappy, that your kids are doomed to struggle. That's not what the data shows. A longitudinal study in the Journal of Happiness Studies followed people for 18 years, before, during, and after divorce. Yes, there's a significant dip in life satisfaction during the divorce itself. That's real. But most people return to their baseline happiness within 2 to 5 years. Some even exceed their pre-divorce levels. The people who thrived engaged in personal growth. They built stronger support systems. They didn't stay stuck in anger or victimhood. They created new purpose and meaning. The people who struggled long-term stayed in high conflict dynamics with their ex. They isolated themselves. They remained bitter. They didn't address their mental health. And children, the largest meta-analysis ever conducted, reviewing data from over 67,000 children, found that children from low conflict divorces had similar long-term outcomes to children from intact families. Similar educational attainment, similar relationship stability, similar mental health. The children who struggle were specifically those exposed to high ongoing conflict, whether in an intact family or after divorce. Dr. Mavis Hetherington, who conducted a landmark 30-year study, concluded that the majority of children from divorced families are resilient. They experience transient problems, but most recover and function well. The key word, transient, temporary, not permanent, not lifelong. If parents create the right environment. Your outcome is not predetermined. The statistics are not your destiny. The choices you make right now in the middle of this chaos are what determine where you land 5 years from now. Real stories of transformation. Let me share a few stories. Real people, real transformation. James came to me 2 years into a bitter custody battle. He'd spent $150,000 in legal fees. His relationship with his ex was toxic. His kids were showing signs of anxiety. He was exhausted. In our first session, he said, I just want to win. I want the court to see who she really is. I asked him, and then what? You win everything you're asking for. What does your life look like 5 years from now? He couldn't answer. So we started there. We built a vision, not what he wanted to prevent, but what he wanted to create. He wanted peace. He wanted his kids to feel safe with both parents. He wanted to date again, financial stability. He wanted to stop waking up at 3 a.m. with his chest tight. Once he got clear on that, everything changed. He settled the custody dispute, not because he gave up, but because he realized that continuing to fight wasn't going to deliver the life he wanted. 3 years later, his kids are thriving. He's remarried. He and his ex have a functional co-parenting relationship. He has peace. He didn't win the case the way he originally wanted, but he absolutely won the future. Then there's Amanda. She came to me at the very beginning of her divorce, terrified. Her ex made significantly more money. She hadn't worked in 12 years. Her attorney was pushing her to fight for maximum alimony, maximum child support, and go for everything. But Amanda said something remarkable. I don't want to spend 5 years fighting. I don't want my kids watching their parents hate each other. What's the minimum I need to be okay? Let's start there. We built a financial plan, got clear on what okay actually required. She went back to school, started rebuilding her career, negotiated a settlement that was fair, not maximum, but fair. And because she approached it collaboratively, her ex actually helped, gave more than the initial offer because she wasn't trying to destroy him. Last month, she texted me a photo of her first paycheck from her new job. She's fully self-sufficient. Her kids are proud of her. Her ex is supportive. And she has something no settlement can buy: dignity, self-respect, and peace. One more, Daniel. His wife left him for someone else, devastated, humiliated, angry. For 6 months, he was stuck, wouldn't move forward, wouldn't engage in settlement talks. He wanted her to hurt the way he was hurting. In one of our sessions, I said, Daniel, you get to be angry. That's valid. But how long are you going to let her determine your emotional state? Because right now, she's out living her life and you're sitting here stuck. Who's actually winning? That hit him hard. The next week, he came back and said, I don't want to give her that power anymore. I want my life back. We built a plan, not just legal, a full life plan. He started therapy, joined a men's group, started exercising again, and settled the divorce quickly. 2 years later, he's a different person, confident, happy, dating, living in New York City, following a dream he'd shelved for 15 years. He recently told me the divorce was the worst thing and the best thing that ever happened to him. It broke him open. But what came through was the real, authentic Daniel. He won the future. These are just normal people. They're people like you and me who hurt, who struggled, who faced impossible choices. But they made one critical decision. They were going to win the future, not just the case, and that made all the difference. We're near the end of our time together, and I want to leave you with something you can carry forward. If you take nothing else from this episode, take this. The courtroom is not where your future is decided. You are. Every day you're making choices. Some are big, legal decisions, financial settlements, custody arrangements, but most are small. How you respond to your ex's texts, whether you vent about them in front of your kids, whether you invest in therapy or tell yourself you can't afford it, whether you let bitterness become your identity or choose consciously to rebuild. These small choices compound. They become the trajectory of your life. 5 years from now, you'll look back and realize the verdict that mattered wasn't the one that judge issued. It was the one you issued for yourself through your daily choices. I know this is hard. These are days when you don't want to be the bigger person, when you want to fight, when you want them to pay. I've been there, but I'm asking you to consider, what do you want more? Do you want vindication or do you want peace? Do you want to be right or do you want to be free? Do you want to win the case or do you want to win your life? You're standing at a fork in the road. One path leads to a long, exhausting, expensive battle that might give you a settlement you feel good about for a few weeks. The other path leads you to a life you feel good about for decades. Both paths are hard. Both require courage, but only one leads you to you 2.0. So here's my invitation. Start thinking like someone building a future, not fighting a battle. Get support. Protect your children's emotional safety above all else. Make financial decisions for long-term stability, not short-term satisfaction. Invest in figuring out who you are and what you want to become. Choose peace, not as weakness, but as strategy. And remember, this doesn't last forever. The intensity you're feeling right now will pass. The fog will clear, and on the other side, there's a version of you that's stronger, wiser, and more authentic than you've ever been. But you do have to choose that future, every day, in small ways and big ways. The goal of divorce isn't to win the case, it's to win your life. And you, my friend, are worth winning for. Thank you for being here today. I know this was a heavy one, but I hope it gave you something real to hold on to. If this episode resonated with you, I want to invite you to check out my book, You 2.0 Divorce: A Better Way Forward, and the companion, You 2.0 Workbook. Both are available on Amazon.com, and they give you practical, actionable tools for everything we talked about today. If you're ready to explore what working together might look like, visit my website at www.reclaimandreboot.me and schedule a free 30-minute consultation. No pressure, no obligation, just a conversation about where you are and where you want to go. And if you found value in this episode, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe where you listen to podcasts, leave a review. It helps us reach more people who are navigating this transition. And remember, your divorce is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of you 2.0. Until next time, take care of yourself.